The United Nations Secretary General spokesperson Stephane Dujarric says the world body is concerned by the current situation in Palma, Mozambique. The UN has condemned the attacks and also conveyed messages of condolences to the families of the victims. Meanwhile, International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor has weighed in on the attacks in Mozambique.
The Department of International Relations and Cooperation has been very concerned about the reported plight of a number of South African citizens who are in Mozambique and who we understand have been affected by recent attacks, particularly in the city of Palma. We have asked our mission in Mozambique to provide every assistance to our citizens. And I was very pleased earlier today to receive a report that over 40 South Africans have been accounted for. And I must express my deepest condolences at learning of the loss of life of one of our citizens. But I urge our mission and all the officials within it, our ambassador as well, to continue to do all they can to provide assistance to our citizens and to any citizen of Mozambique who may be in need of help. We, through our government, will provide any support that might be necessary to our friendly sisters and brothers of Mozambique, and we continue to be concerned at the violence that has been reported widely in the media.
Dr. Sikwani Ncube is a senior lecturer at the Department of Public Law at the University of Johannesburg. He joins me now live. Doc, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time. So there is much reportage on the latest developments in Mozambique, but this is not where it started. I want you to take us back to about October 2017.
Good evening, Crisalda, and good evening to your listeners as well. Of course, this has gained the spotlight now, but it started in October 2017 when a group that announced itself at the time attacked 3 police stations, and ultimately some of them were captured and so forth. But the problem is not just the beginning of the conflict, it is the background to that. Why was the group formed? What are their grievances? So in understanding the grievances that got them to this act, then we may be able to understand what the group is about and what they seek to achieve.
Talk to us a bit about those grievances. I guess that will bring a lot into context about where we are now in terms of the situation.
Of course, these are the common drivers of terrorism, as we often refer to it. We're talking poverty, we're talking underdevelopment, we are talking lack of social services, and this makes it easy for these insurgents to come in and recruit. It makes it easy because they can relate to the people, they can motivate them and encourage them to join them because they perceive the government as a common enemy. So when we look at the Cabo Delgado province, the poverty is rife, and it makes it easy for these insurgents to move in and talk to the local communities and bring in their own people and recruit. When you look at the reports that have been out in the media, there's been a lot of recruitment and reports as well of some young boys being executed because they refused to join the group. So the problems are deeper than just the group's appetite to establish an Islamic State.
I want to talk about the role of failed states or fragile states, if we can. We're not just talking about the situation in Mozambique, but how that perhaps contributes towards adding to a fertile ground for this kind of insurgency.
Certainly, and I think when you look at it from that perspective, it enables us to understand why it is that the group can inflict such damage, Crisalda. And we are told, when we talk about the reports that have been coming out, 50 military officers in Mozambique killed, and whenever there are clashes, you are told there were 100 insurgents and so forth. So the size of the group tells us that they were able to coordinate, they were able to recruit, they were able to train. And that can only happen in an environment where the intelligence, the national intelligence is weak, where the national police is weak, where the local security structures are weak. Because in instances where these competent, before these guys can even plan an attack, intelligence will reach the appropriate offices and these will be thwarted. So we are sitting with the problem now because Mozambique is a weak state. And the problem that we are faced with now is that there's a risk of spillover attacks. And if this is not addressed, surely it's going to be a problem for the whole of SADC. Talk of Zimbabwe, talk of Malawi, talk of South Africa. All these countries have to stand up and be counted. Otherwise, this is going to be a bigger problem.
Is it that the North perhaps is seen to be extremely underdeveloped and that Maputo is not focused much on the development of the North? Yet you have some of these companies who I guess others could perhaps accuse of coming in to drain resources and leave these communities underdeveloped. Does that feature anywhere?
It does, because there's been little in terms of what the group wants to achieve. With bits and pieces of maybe their demands for Sharia law to be the main law of the state. We have demands for certain other things. But when you look at it holistically, you realize that we cannot move away from the so-called resource curse, because these are people that have grown up in the area. These are people who know the area. And when they see multinationals come in and siphon their resources, and there's little benefit to the local men and women in that community, then as you can expect, the anger arises in that space, and it's easy even for these insurgents to come in and say, oh, you are angry because these guys did this. We have a solution, and the solution is violence. We have always said in peace and security studies that violence is always, it's a language, and it's a language that people resort to because the usual, hello, let's talk about this, has not worked. So what the government has to do now is to try and understand the foundation, the grievances, because it will be simplistic and dangerous to look at them as just Islamist insurgents and dismiss them as such.
And what do you make of the response of government there in terms of how the situation has been handled?
Well, I think it's in two parts. The first, I would say, is appropriate because when first with a problem like that, you have to respond militarily to try and bring it under control. But on the other hand, I think there have been excesses. We are told of villages being attacked, I think it was last year or late 2019, of villages being attacked because supposedly they were harboring these insurgents. We are told of refugee boats being sunk because apparently they were carrying insurgents. And you realize that such incidents then also contribute to the anger of the locals, and it makes it easy for these groups to recruit. I cannot emphasize this enough, that in responding to such situations, the most appropriate thing to do is to try and starve these guys of support. And when the government engages in actions that alienate them, then obviously when people are pushed from the government, they are pushed towards the insurgents.
Dr. Sikwani Ncube, thank you very much indeed for your time. A senior lecturer at the Department of Public Law at the University of Johannesburg, joining us on the program tonight.